welcome to the latest edition of Now You Know. And I'm going to introduce our guests in a minute, but I want people to know that this show is now very technologically up to date. We have multiple screens, we have mics, we have iPads, we have a new Apple computer here.
And John in the background.
And John in the background. This is just amazing here. So we are smoking it on technology now, yeah. So just so you know. And my guest, you probably know him. You've probably seen him on TV maybe multiple times. I believe, Mike, is this your third time? Third time on the show, and this is really our version of the travel channel, right. I think. And we're hoping that we can enlist Mike to come at least once a year to give us an update. He travels frequently, and we're fortunate that he records all of his trips, and you're going to hear about one of them now. Let me, I guess, reintroduce Mike Walker.
I do.
And Mike, before we get going, you want to explain the Bigelow Brewing marketing campaign that's going on here?
Yeah, what's interesting is Pam Powers went on a trip with me in 2010 to Europe. Yeah. And of course we had to deal with a volcano in Iceland erupting, etc. But anyway, Pam talked about, opening a wine shop or something like that, and that turned into Bigelow Brewery, and because Jeff's passion was, beer, and he wanted to open that, and he was an engineer. I coached Jeff. I was an assistant coach football back in he graduated in 1980, but of course we had those times that for 4 years he was a freshman. And so I've known Jeff for a long time, and our first trip to New Zealand, I wore his shirt, and just inadvertently, and so I sent it to him and said, hey, the Bigelow Brewery is, we're marketing that, in New Zealand, because I love it. So it just became a thing, and so in fact they gave me this shirt, and so every trip we've gone to, I wore this shirt. And of course, many people know Jeff passed away a few weeks ago, and which was very sad, and it was shocking. And so I decided to wear this today because, as on every trip, and I'll continue to do that, I just think what they did was remarkable, and it's we love going up there, and we have friends when they come, they love going up there. It's just a very wholesome thing, and it's been great for the community. So
certainly.
So that's why I'm wearing it.
Yep, very good.
Yep.
Now, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about today, we went to the Tetons. The trip today was the Tetons, Yellowstone, and then, if we have time, Great Basin. We went south into Nevada on the western border to one of the least visited parks. 90,000 people per year go to the Great Basin, but we went there for a particular reason. I'll talk if we have time to do that.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly.
And the first slide we have here, Chris, is just a list of the national parks. And when we travel, one thing I really do love is so many people, and a lot of times rangers will say, oh my goodness, you're from Maine, we love Acadia. And you'll notice the 5th most visited park, and this is from 2022, is Acadia, 3.9 million. Of course, a lot of Mainers will say it's overloved. Yeah. And I think the cruise ships probably have a lot to do with that also. But you notice it's above Yellowstone, which was a shock. And in January, Gene and I went to Grand Canyon and Joshua Tree. So we've been to 8 out of the 10 here. And next year we're going to do Glacier and then go up to Banff in Canada and do some of the Canadian parks too.
That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, it's so. Some beautiful pictures here, some information. So we'll concentrate on those 3 parks.
Before you go on to that, of course, Yellowstone. You're gonna talk about how big that park is.
It's huge,
and it must be many times larger than Acadia.
Oh yeah, Acadia. I don't know the square, mileage, but it's pretty vast. It really is up in that upper left quadrant of Wyoming, and it covers a lot of territory.
So I guess my point is that Yellowstone, and I've been there once, and that was back a long time ago, back in the 1990s, and back then, summertime, it was pretty darn crowded.
Oh yeah.
And it's, if I recollect from your information, it's like 2.2 million acres, and I don't remember the size of Acadia, but it's many times the size of Acadia. So if that's crowded with, you know, with that type of acreage, you can see how crowded Acadia
Exactly.
would
That's
be.
why now I go to Cadillac, you have to register. I mean, you have to get a time slot to go up because it was just so many people trying to get up there.
Exactly right.
So yeah, and some places, some of the national parks, same thing. We've had to do that. They had when we were Olympic, we went to Washington in September, and to go up to, you know, one of the mountains for a hike, you had to. They cut it off after like 400 cars. I think you know, after that, they just because it couldn't handle it, there was a fire up there. So
yeah,
you know, with you know, I hate to say it, porta potties and water and stuff like that. So they had to limit it. So we went early in the morning and we had a beautiful hike.
Yeah.
So those are the just to show where we were, you know. But as Acadia, it's amazing how many of the rangers love it. Well, when we landed, Chris, we landed in Salt Lake City, and you know, when you drive north, of course, you get the orange, the limestone, you know, of Utah. But then, of course, we had about a 5-hour drive, and we were going to meet Amy and Skylar Hamilton for lunch in Jackson. So it was a beautiful morning, and as we, of course, start entering Wyoming, you start seeing the country, you know, the mountains, the open plains, and a lot of smaller towns. That's what's weird. You know, Wyoming only has 500,000 people population.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
which is kind of surprising. You always picture it. But Jackson, of course, one of those popular places, got an airport, a lot of moneyed people end up in Jackson. But you know, Yellowstone, of course, is very popular.
You know, outside of the Yellowstone area, most of Wyoming, as I recollect, is very open.
It's very open.
Very open, and I just remember tumbleweeds and prairie dogs.
Yeah.
And just very open. So you think of Yellowstone, but Yellowstone is very atypical of what the rest of the Wyoming is.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, you see the pictures here too. And this is coming in, this is really kind of along the Snake River. I mean, the Snake River, you know, ends up through our parks, you know, ends up into the Columbia. The Columbia ends up in Washington. So we saw both sides of this, but this is the type of terrain we just stopped, and this is before we got to Jackson, and it was just beautiful, you know. And again, here, the Snake River, and this is kind of when you think of Wyoming, I think we kind of think of, you know, it's, I haven't watched the show, Yellowstone, but
yeah.
I think that's where you picture the horses and the horseback and wild country and the trees and mountains and things.
It looks like the water was flowing pretty well there.
It was. We met with, it happened to be Amy's 40th birthday, just by happenstance. Amy is on.
By the way, this is Tom and Peggy Hamilton's daughters. Yep. For those of you, I'm sure, that know Tom and Peggy.
Tom, you know, does the Hooskow radio, and Tom and Peggy were both teachers at the Cornville School with my wife Jean.
Yeah.
They're our neighbors actually, and I had Amy and Skylar in class. And so they both went to Germany with me. I was the German European trips, but they've loved it. They've thrived out there, and they're young ladies now. Skylar has her daughter Joanna there, and Amy, they just, you know, they really enjoy it. They live in Alpine, and but you know, they love the outdoors and camping and skiing. And Skylar's husband's a carpenter. They build, you know, so it's really neat. It was a great visit, and as you can see here in this park, there are 4 entrances to the park in Jackson, and this is one of them, you know, so it's like a north, south, east, west entrance to the park, and those are all elk antlers, you know. That's pretty fascinating. Yeah, appropriate.
Yeah.
What we did is we were at Jackson because, as you can imagine, it's very, very expensive to stay there. And of course, my wife is incredible in finding places, Airbnbs and places. So we stayed in Victor, Idaho, which was about 25 miles from Jackson. So we crossed up over the mountains. You know, you climbed up the mountains and then down the mountains on the other side.
You didn't need chains, did you?
Didn't need chains, but in wintertime you would. You know, in fact, they'll say you have to chain up at certain points. You know, so it's mandatory. And you can see why. I mean, but this is the back side of the Teton. So Amy gave us this hint. She said there's a spot somewhere, you know, near Victor, where you go, and I can't remember the name of this turnout, but so Jean and I, we were in Victor, and then we went to a spot, and then went up over the mountains, and we were only 2 cars there and the other person there. But so this is the back side of the Grand Teton. It's in the cloud there. But it's kind of neat seeing this side of it because, you know, people, I think a lot of people don't see the back side of the Tetons. They see, you know, of course, Jackson. And
this was June, Mike.
this
right?
is in June, yeah. We landed, we left June 3rd, so this would have been June, actually, this would have been June 4th, this particular picture. So the next, we stayed in Victor and had a, you know, it was nice, but the next day we were leaving to head to the Tetons. And what I've got here, and it's hard for people to see, but this Tetons, I have my own notes here, but just to give an idea, the Tetons, the name came from, they say either trappers, the word for Teton is breasts, so I mean they look at that.
If you hadn't said it, I was going to ask you just to put you on the spot.
Put me on the spot, and then there's an Indian, the Native Indians, the Fremont Indians had the Tiwanaut. You know, there's a mountain called that, but it meant many pinnacles. Okay. And when you think of the Tetons, you do think of many pinnacles.
Absolutely.
Rockefeller, by the way, John Rockefeller silently bought a lot of land who actually and donated to this park. So that's through the help of Rockefeller, they added this. And
kind of sounds a little like Acadia's formation.
Exactly, yeah, Acadia, and who knows for what purpose, but he was a big outdoorsman, actually. Yeah. It was a national monument, and then they combined this in 50, and so you had, it covers 3,100 acres, 310,000 acres, excuse me. And the one fascinating part we found, I kept thinking, why are these so different? And these Tetons were formed 10 million years ago. I mean, the basic rock, were 2 billion years ago, but of course, through the tectonic plates, you know, 80 million years ago with the Pacific and, you know, the uprise, you know, so the land rose, and then about 10 million years ago, they said the earthquakes were phenomenal, you know, in terms of that, and plus then glaciers, and so.
And you were going to well, actually, before we went on the air, you were giving me perspective on 10 million years, because 10 million years sounds like a heck of a long time ago.
Yeah.
But if you compare that to the Appalachians, which you said were 500
million years old.
Now you can understand that the Tetons are relatively young in the whole scheme of things.
Yeah, they talk about, if you look, they said that the Appalachians were at one point as high as the Himalayas. Yeah. And of course, in over 500 million years, as we see now through, you know, all of the weather events and glaciers, they get rounded, and what we see today is, you know, the product of that mountain falling to the sea. And the other thing, that's why we start with the Tetons, because it's so new. I mean, in time, they will also, you know, erode, and you'll get much more of a base. And I think, you know, it adds soil, you get, you know, more trees growing, so you'll still see the tops, but it is a beautiful. Oh, yeah. This gives you an idea. This is Teton National Park, and the main roadway, you know, runs along the side here. We did cross Lake Jenny, which we'll see, but the Teton Range, as you can see with my cursor, I hope you can see that there. But there are many spots of, you know, taking pictures along here too, and that's what you're going to see. And it was just an absolutely spectacular day. We were very fortunate. So as we crossed over the mountains, you know, from Victor coming down in at one spot, that's what you see. You know, this is the Teton Range, and it really is awe-inspiring. As you can see here, the camera captures one part, but, you know, we're looking at this vista of, you know, a huge mountain range. And Jackson Hole, we talked about the seismic event, and why you can see that, literally talk about the east side of this mountain range almost collapsing at that time and sinking, plus with the glaciers, and that's what the so-called hole. You know, that's Jackson Hole is, you know, actually a depression of just caving in, basically. And, you know, so when you look above, I'll have a picture here later to show you the hole, but it's surrounded by mountains. And this the Teton Range is, as I said, only 10 million years old.
Now, a lot of people who haven't traveled out west probably don't have a concept of the height of these mountains, but what are we talking about? 12, 13,000 feet?
12, 13,000 feet, yeah. So the Teton is here is 13,770 feet. And this cursor, this is the Grand Teton here.
Yep.
Okay, and Teton is here, and I think that's 12,000.
Yeah.
So these, I think there were something like 8 or 12 peaks above 12,000 feet. So
Wow.
that 13 is the Grand Teton, and you have a middle, and then South Teton is here.
Yeah.
So it's just, and there are, of course, glaciers, and
Of course, you're at an elevation there too.
True.
Is it 6,000?
6,000 feet.
6,000 feet.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
in Jackson. So,
Yeah.
we were already, through the continental uplift, we are already at, 6,000 feet. And there were times we would be hiking, I'm thinking, why? Like,
Why are you getting out of breath?
Exactly. And there were times in the Great Basin too, we were starting at 8,000 feet,
Yeah.
climbing another 1,000 feet. And you're thinking, geez, HR puff and stuff.
Well, I've done a few ski trips out west, and I was up as high as 13,000 feet. And I remember skiing across the top of to get to a trail.
Right.
And I was so out of breath, and I said, God, I knew elevation made a difference. Well, anyways, I found out the statistic, I believe, was there was 41% less oxygen at that elevation than there was at sea level. So no wonder.
So it's not age.
You're out of,
Not age, yeah.
Well, probably a combination,
Yeah.
actually.
Well, we're in our late 60s, very late 60s.
Yeah.
So but I think we do okay. But
Okay.
you do notice it. I notice it. As I said, there are many stops along the way, and this is the Mormon Row. There's a road. In fact, you'll see there's a famous barn, but you just get different vistas. And I put a few slides here because we take typically. We probably took 50 pictures, along this time. But what we do is, my wife is brutal. She'll compare pictures, and she cuts them. So we whittle it down. And so I said, "No, you can't." She goes, "Hey," she compares one to the other. But
she's your editor.
She, for the most part, she'll before we both take pictures. And Jean's really, she's a great photographer. But she, before she sends them to me, she has already whittled down sometimes 90% of what she took. But this is this is on the Mormon Road, and what part of it is, you had settlers coming to this area. Not only the Oregon Trail we know about, but the Mormons, when they moved westward too, had set up different settlements, and so this was the Mormon Historic District, and there's several barns. It's a very famous barn. You see the Molten Barns, they called it. This was here the Schwabacher, and in Schwabach is a town in Germany, and the ER means like a Mainer, it's a Mainer. So this is probably where they think the name derived from.
Yeah.
But the fascinating part about this here is it's an offshoot of the Snake River, but sometimes you have these little tributaries, feeding in, but of course because it's mirrored, the Tetons are mirrored there.
I can see the reflection.
Yeah, you have many, many photos, professional photos, but I think Gene captured a beauty here too, of the Tetons. And again, one here, this is from a beaver dam. The beaver dam had set this up, so this is, what here, and they have trails around here. But like you said, you can hike here, you can do mountain climbing, but for us, we did this, one day, and then we were heading to Yellowstone for 3 days. This is here the Snake River overlook, and by the way, Ansel Adams has taken some very famous photographs.
Yeah.
And if there's one of the Snake River, and it must be I'm assuming a sunset, but it's just spectacular because he did a lot of black and white, and he did Yosemite, he did the Tetons, but he loved being here too. Yes. But he has one of the Snake River and the Tetons that if you can look online, it's
just gorgeous.
It is gorgeous. Yeah. This is the Molten Barn, and we're now at in the Mormon district, and we kind of picked this one. There's one that's probably a little bit more famous. It's got a fence around it, and you can almost see in the background this hedgerow. Well, down there, a couple of tour buses and people. So we walked down, we parked and walked here. It's the similar barns, and there was nobody here. I think it's somewhat. It's it's a historical thing, so they preserve it, and it seemed to be people working also, because there's some parts you couldn't get to. But we took this barn because the other barn that you see in a lot of pictures of has a fence, but there were a lot of people there, and we figured, it's here, it's just so private, and you got to walk around and look at the building itself.
Are there many Mormons still in that area?
No, I don't believe so. I don't think there are as many, and I can't say, but I think here this is more of like a historical district now, so it's I think the early settlers. I'm sure there are Mormons, but and one of the things we did, this is Lake Jenny, and this is also in the Tetons, but what we did is that you have to ferry across, and there's a waterfall, beautiful waterfall, and we had to hike up about 1,000 feet. And you can see down below here, so you're hiking up again, the little HR puff and stuff, but it was nice. It was quite a few people. And the other thing too is we had brought a rock. There's a Todd Wakeham, had passed away, and at his celebration of life, I know you're not supposed to, we did, but we put it in a very unobtrusive spot at this inspiration point. And I think that's one thing when we travel, I always, you see something very beautiful, and we do. We think of people you'd love to be there. You think, geez, I wish so-and-so could be here, both alive and those who have passed on. And I had a childhood friend who passed away last January. I think of him. My brother passed away many years ago. But, you just think of people who would appreciate it. And
take a little piece of them and bring it there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, Todd came on this one. And as I said, we always carry the Bigelow shirt, too. And, from now on, you'll always think of Jeff, too. This is, again, we were here, as you can see with the cursor, this was Inspiration Point. That's where we were. So that's where we came up to. This is taken from the boat, ferry back. So this was the background. So where Gene was sitting in this last photo here, in behind us, the Teton. So it was, just beautiful range, but it's also the view. You can see Jackson, you can see the valley out there. That's Jackson Hole. But you'll see a different spot here, too.
For those who haven't traveled out west, I mean, in my opinion, you're missing something.
Oh, gee,
because, I mean, and we have many beautiful places in the Northeast, and particularly in Maine, but you don't have this unbelievable, majestic mountains and certain topography that you do out there. It's just, as I say all the time, it's like the Earth, the difference in the Earth and the Moon. It's just very, very different, and your pictures certainly represent that.
And I think that's the thing about the Tetons. Everybody just think, why are they so different? But they seem so accessible. You're standing at the base, and you can see the base, pretty much. And our mountains here often, halfway up are trees, and in a lot of our hikes, and I think of the New Hampshire range, and here you're hiking up through woods till you get to the very top, and then you get to see the view. And here, you're looking at pretty much the whole mountain. And again, like you said, at 13,000 feet, that's not from the ground 13,000 feet up, but that's the above sea level.
It's still a 7,000, 8,000.
Exactly.
Thing.
This is called Mount Moran, and one of the fascinating parts about this is there's the Skillet Glacier, because it looks like somewhat of a skillet, probably not in this picture, but they have the Skillet Glacier is here, and there are glaciers along some of this too. You can see the snowfields, obviously, but this is we took this in June, so early June. So, but there's a lot of snowfields, and you can barely see where my cursor is. Right here is a black, they call it black dike intrusion. What that is during that seismic activity in the earthquakes, you have a fault and a split, and magma came up. And we talked before we went on air here, is Scudic Point has these. If you go to Scudic Point in Bar Harbor, you'll see these, they call them, dikes or dams. And you see it sometimes with quartz, and sometimes you see here, like this, they call it the intrusive, but that's a magma. And they said if that were liquid, that Lake Jenny that you saw where Gene's overlooking would fill that 3 times over, which, again, those are the type things I love reading about and fascinate me. But this is the Mount Moran, and this is from Signal Hill. The reason they call this Signal Hill is It was kind of a murder mystery, sort of. There was a man who went missing, and of course this was back in the 1800s, late 1800s, and they went looking for him. Of course, they don't have cell phones as we do today, so they said, look, if we find him, we'll light a signal up on the hill here, so people could see it.
Sure.
They did find him. He was deceased, and I think they had to decide, was he killed or did he die naturally? And I didn't find out the answer to that yet. And I don't even know if they found out either. But this is Signal Hill overlooking, and again, you can see Mount Moran, but just the thing is about the Tetons here is, a lot of it, you're seeing the same mountain range from different viewpoints and vistas. And this was a beautiful drive up, actually. And again, you meet people from all over, pictures. The Snake River coming across here, and where the bend, and it was just kind of a nice framed shot. But that's the neat part about this. You did a lot of walking. We did. By the end of most days, we had done, anywhere between 16 and 25,000 steps. Even though you're riding a lot too. But were you
wearing a Fitbit?
Yeah, we wear a Fitbit. You can't see it during the daytime. And I honestly don't wear this and check it all the time. And I'm not a fanatic, but I'm just more curious. And our phone does pick it up too, where there's a little bit of a discrepancy. Yep. But the thing is, you usually walking or hiking, 7 to 10 or 12 miles a day. So yeah. And this is what we were talking about, Jackson Hole. You can see it's surrounded by mountains. The Tetons are kind of behind us, and you have the Wyoming hills here too. But this is what they call Jackson Hole, because it's really a valley, basically a hole in between this mountain range. And of course, that's where the airport is. The money people fly into
for sure.
Jackson Hole.
I told you for years I confused the town with the plane, or
right.
the Jackson Hole.
Yeah.
The town is actually Jackson.
Correct. Yeah, that's Jackson. And the Jackson Hole is really the valley, see. And a lot of times glaciers will carve out a U-shaped valley, a lot of mountain ranges too. And so the next day we spent a day here and spent a day in the park. We had a place in the park, and the next day we're heading to Yellowstone.
Yep.
And it was about 50 miles. And before we checked in, we're going to stop at the Old Faithful Inn, but we couldn't check in, so we had to pass by it. But we did it, and I'll show you a map here in a second. But Yellowstone, and you can see here, and read it. Like Chris, I talked, it covers 2.2 million acres, so it's a lot of territory, 3,400 square miles. Which is, again, hard to comprehend, but a lot of it, as you mentioned, is wild. I mean, you call the willy wax, someplace you didn't want to break down. It's, we're on major roads, but a lot of times you do not see. It's fascinating. Sometimes the population of some of these places, and later on.
By the way, you did see buffalo or bison.
Oh,
right?
yeah,
it's hard not to.
Yeah, this has, it's teeming with wildlife.
There's always one idiot who has to approach the
I've got a quick story on one of the slides. But you can see the 10,000 thermal features they talk about. And we're going to see, I'll show you pictures here. There are geysers.
Yep.
There are hot springs, mud pots, what we talked about before in the air, and fumaroles. And we'll explain all those slides when we get there. As we said too, 50% or 60% of the active geysers are at Yellowstone. We saw some geysers in Iceland and New Zealand, but 50 or 60% here.
Right here.
And one of the most famous, of course, is Old Faithful, which you'll see. Has its own Grand Canyon here, about 20 miles long, and you see pictures. Yellowstone Lake also, 131 square miles and 141 miles along the shore, and we drove a lot of that shore. The one thing Gene and I do is we do a lot of driving, and for a lot of people, it may be dry, but from place to place, we try to group, and we're doing national parks. We've seen 41 since 2019, so we've done a lot of flying and driving.
How many national parks are there?
I think there are 63 at this point.
Yeah, so you've covered 2/3 of them.
Yeah, we've covered 2/3 at this point. And some we will never see. I mean, there are some in Alaska that you have to get to an out-of-the-way spot and then take a small plane to get to that.
You haven't been to Denali, have you?
No, not
Or
yet.
Alaska?
We haven't been to Alaska, which we will get to, but
That's another show.
that's another show. Yeah, next year we're going to do Glacier and Banff, some of the Canadian to group that, and then the northern California, Yosemite and Sequoia.
It makes sense.
Yeah, so we regroup it. We just did Washington in September, so we saw Olympic. We saw 3 national parks there, and that was beautiful. And again, you had 290 waterfalls in Yellowstone, and tons of wildlife. They said 1,000 miles of hiking trails. So if for people, some people, hike and camp there, for weeks at a time. You can camp there. We were there 3 days, and we covered a lot of territory, a lot of places.
You better make your reservations away.
Exactly. Yeah.
And by the way, this is the first national park.
Yes, first national park was back in the late 1800s. The world's first national park.
World's first.
Yep. I'm glad you picked that up. Thank you. On the map here, as you can see, we came in from the south. From the Tetons, and we spent the first day. You can see where my cursor is here on the left. These are all geyser stops, hot springs, all your basically volcanic activity.
Was Old Faithful Old Faithful?
Old Faithful, yes, it was, and I will explain. You're going to see that. You're going to see. Yeah, we stayed at the inn, which is right here. So we didn't stop there. We couldn't check in at this point. So we drove 50 miles to get here, and then we began stopping along different spots, and you could spend probably a few weeks just in this area. But
easily,
just to give you an idea, that we spent the first day in this area. So we drove this whole circumference along, we mentioned the Yellowstone Lake, along here back to Old Faithful. So we did this whole loop. Day 2, we went and we spent in the northern part of Yellowstone here. And then day 3, to give you an idea, is the Grand Canyon here. We went up into Montana to the Beartooth Highway. So it gives people an idea of, day 1 was in this area, day 2 in this area, in the Grand Canyon. And then day 3, we went up into Montana and part of Wyoming for the Beartooth Highway. So this here is the hot spring, and you can see everywhere you looked, you would see these smoke. It was, again, a beautiful day when we were here, and these are hot springs, and you have some mini geysers too, but the water can be about 170 degrees, and you have some people who decide, well, gee, I'm going to put my hand in, or I'm going to jump in, which is crazy. But you mentioned about people doing some stupid stuff with wildlife too, and people have been gored by wildlife, etc. But so this is the hot spring, the first place we went to, and they have boardwalks around here, and they tell you, say, one of the next stops, and you can see in the background, we decided not to go to, one side, a lot of buses stop here, and I think it's good because people who can't move well, I say the elderly, or people want to get up close, they have this boardwalk, you can get close to this, but Gene follows travel, people who travel in suggestions, and they said to really see it, there's a hike you can do in and go up above. There are plenty of people where we were here, but you get a good down view of this. This is about 370 feet long.
It's very colorful. It seems to go from blue to green to yellow to reddish colored, and
exactly.
Very nice.
And this is about 120 feet deep. And part of this is, of course, the way the alpine milk, here, and the sunlight, of course, how it reflects, and it's from the steam. But what this color is, they're called thermophiles, and it's really microorganisms that feed off these hot springs, and you see this all throughout, and it uses photosynthesis, but also it feeds off the minerals, breaks down the minerals of these hot springs. So you see this, what this orange is, these are all called thermophiles. It's interesting to read about, but so all this color are those organisms that you see, plus the minerals. So but this is a grand prismatic, and it's one of the most famous the most famous hot springs in the world. I think it's the 3rd largest hot spring in the world. This is, Chris had mentioned this, a mud pot. And a mud pot, and then one of the things we talked about is it doesn't have the force, as you can see these hot springs that bubble up, and geysers, of course, shoot up in the air, and what you see is just a little, a second. It's like a clay. What it happens is the hot water doesn't have that same force, but it's still breaking down the rock around it, creating almost a clay. You know, so it's like a mud pot. And that's what they call a mud pot. This, I think, is like one of the artists. And you can see in the background too. It's all throughout here. In this area, there were hot springs and small geysers too. Here we're at the Norris Geyser Basin. They call this the Porcelain Basin, and it was massive. You know, we didn't hike all of it because, again, there's a lot of places we were traveling to and wanted to see, but this hike led us down, and you can overlook here, and these are all hot springs, and all this. Here's the runoff, you know, from this almost a travertine, you know, that comes up, and it's the calcite that, you know, that dampens and. You know, it's beautiful. And you can see a small geyser. And the geysers, of course, you know, shoot up, and you'll see Old Faithful before, but, you know, the hot springs, you know, bubble up, and the geysers, you know, build up this steam and, you know, and release water.
That's right.
You know, so, and we talked about, too, that Yellowstone was a collapsed caldera of a volcano, a massive volcano that collapsed about 600,000 years ago. And, so in that time, of course, you know, it is covered, and we talked about volcanic action underneath is, you know, still bubbling, and if they always talked about if that exploded, 70,000 years ago it did, and it covered. We said it was like what 3,500 square miles or something. It was
actually, I think, 5,800.
5,800.
Yep, I think. It was huge. 3,400 is the park itself, and so you got to figure. So that's almost not quite twice as large,
right? And so
and the park is, if I remember right, is the size of Rhode Island and Delaware. Which is, those are small states, but still,
it's still
pretty amazing.
Area. It is. This is you know, one of the falls, of course. Here, the Yellowstone River. Coming down, and it's, you know, oh, sorry about that. But the force of the water you can hear is just, it's awe-inspiring. And as I said, the amount of waterfalls you see in Yellowstone, you know, is amazing. Wow. And so we went to here, and this is the north rim of the Grand Canyon. So the south rim, because we were traveling. The first day, and then the next day we're going to do the north rim, but the south rim of the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone, and that's, they said, about 1,000 feet deep, and it's about 20 miles long. And you can see over time, of course, millions of years, how it's cut through. The Yellowstone that to this day continues to, you know, cut through. And this is looking the other direction. So we're up above, you know, looking one side, you know, here is the Grand Canyon, the waterfall coming in, and this is the Yellowstone River passing through here.
Now you can apparently you can hike down to the floor.
Yeah, that's that next day we did that. There's a spot we hiked down to, and there are hiking spots around here around the rim. But the next day there's a set thing we did hike down. There was an overlook that's pretty awe-inspiring. So this is one of our last stops on our way to. As I said, we're doing a kind of a circle. This is taken from the car. I mean, when you look at how close it is, this bison, I'm sure, has seen thousands of cars and tourists. Never looked up. I mean, we stopped our car beside this bison here. And never, I don't think it ever looked at us. It just continued to graze, but we also didn't, disturb it. But we took it from the car. We never got out of the car.
Well, you look at those animals, and and of course they've seen a gazillion tourists, so they could care less. But they seem so passive, and they look like a cow or something. Be pretty slow, right? No.
No.
Apparently, you come close and they charge.
Absolutely,
Not
especially
good.
if they've got calves with them.
Yeah.
You will see that later in the Lamar Valley, but and there you have people. I think there was a woman who got gored. I mean, they were one lying down, and she's kind of going to take a selfie, and of course the bison objected to it. And, they gored her. As we're doing a circle around here, we're heading towards the Old Faithful Inn, but of course we drove this day. It was about 200 miles. Because it was all around the different sites. But this is the Yellowstone Lake. And this is the Absaroka mountain range on the other side. You can see how much snow is on the other side, even though it's June.
Is the Old Faithful Inn on the lake? Or is
No,
it
that's on. It's on that picture I showed you before on near the geyser. alley.
Yeah.
The
It's
geyser.
been many years since I've
Yeah.
been there, so I was trying to remember.
Yeah, the lake is here, and Old Faithful Inn is there, and
Well, there are other inns. Yellowstone, the Old Faithful Inn's the biggest one, right? But there are other inns on the.
yeah, on the premises, I think there were 3 or 4 buildings.
Yeah.
And again, I think price, depends on price and what you can pay.
They don't give that stuff away.
They don't give it away, but of course, Jean, as I said, with her points and the way she manufactures things but as you can see, it's almost like our post and beam in a sense. It's interesting. This reminded me a lot. When we went to Norway, of a stave church where they use these ridge pole, almost like pine. The middle, is set off by the poles, and off that they build off that, and you can see this is all done, with the logs, and it's just it was fascinating. I mean, it had seating areas on each level. This is built, it's I think in the 1900s, early 1900s. I had noticed this. I don't know if this goes through the chimney or not, if that's tied on the side, but it looked almost like it goes through that. But it's pretty, and I don't know if this was an active the fire here, but it was a beautiful inn. It was just packed, and but right outside, 150 feet away is a huge concentric circle where you can see Old Faithful, which you're about to see. But this is the Old Faithful Inn. I know when checking in, so we stayed here, and so we got out here. When we're traveling, Jean had an app, and this is on a 90-minute cycle, and it's just it really is amazing, because I thought it was every 90 minutes. That was I was under that impression, but I did read it said sometimes it can be on like a 45-minute to like a 130-minute cycle. This happened to be, while we were there, a 90-minute cycle.
Oh, okay.
So almost every 90 minutes it was going off.
Yeah.
And so, we were timing it. So, okay, it went off at this time. Okay, when we get back, we're going to, unpack, check in, unpack, and then get to it. And so,
Is that the only geyser that's somewhat consistent, or?
I think so. We did see one in Iceland. It was almost every 20 minutes, and it was that went off pretty frequently. But this one here is, Old Faithful, of course, everybody knows, and it goes up. We were sitting there guessing how high it went, and we were way off. And we met a couple, because you're sitting there, you start talking, and we met a couple, it was a really nice couple, and said, how high do you think that is? I said, probably maybe 50 feet. It was about 140 feet. So this is, you see Old Faithful. And what was interesting is, because it was 90 minutes, we said, okay, it's set to go off at 6:12. Well, at 6:13, it started. At 6:14, there it goes. So it was about 2 minutes difference, which is incredible. And we did see it one other time. We went in, had something to eat, and then we went out on the balcony. We went out the balcony and watched it from there. But in the morning, we leave so early in the morning. It was set to go off at 7:30, but we're out the door at 6:30.
Yeah.
So there's places to go, people to see.
Oh yeah.
So here we go. This is Old
here we
Faithful.
go.
This is Old Faithful.
There it goes.
2 minutes. That's pretty darn good.
140 feet. That's a lot of force.
It's a lot of force. And it lasted about 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
I obviously shut it off after a few seconds, but it just continued, and it didn't to that height, but it was just pretty amazing. And then it starts reducing, and then it's almost like that constant steam coming out of it.
Fascinating.
And 90 minutes later, it went off again.
Yep.
90 minutes, because we went inside, as I say, we got something to eat, and came back out, and they have some people go out the terrace and watch it from there, but we were sitting on a bench, and it was, I don't know how many, a few thousand people, sitting there, and it was great. So that was Old Faithful. So the next day, as you mentioned, Chris, going down, we hiked down in the Yellowstone River. The few slides before, we saw the Yellowstone River coming down. This is at the lower falls. And so they have the platform, and of course it's cordoned off, and you got a little fence there, which is nice, thank goodness. But the force of the water is just incredible. This is another you'll hear.
Wow. Like to take your kayak down that?
Yeah, I thought I would do, Greg Louganis, and you hop in.
Look at that.
And you understand how this began carving, and what's interesting about a lot of these, canyons is that they talk about these meandering in time, when they were first formed, meandering water, as far as that continental uplift, would meander until it, it found, it started carving, the course of the river, so the Yellowstone, kind of carved this.
Yeah.
So we went from here, because hiked back up, and then along the way, and as I said, after this video, I had my Bigelow shirt on, and so I sent this to Jeff. And as I said here, I thought that would be very appropriate, a nice spot, and I try to pick neat spots, And of course, you didn't wear it every single day and every single spot, but I thought, the Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, was pretty nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so this was one of the last pictures I sent to him.
Yeah.
And I had one at Mount Moran too that I showed you Yellowstone. In the Tetons, but I didn't. I didn't want to put myself in too many of these, but I had sent this to Jeff, and so I'm wearing my shirt today. Yeah. And this is from up above. As I said, there are a lot of viewpoints along the way you can stop, and for people who don't want to hike down to where we did or walk down, because it can be very strenuous. A lot of switchbacks, and
I would think so.
Yeah, and it depends on if you're infirm or you can't. But the nice part, I think, a lot of these parks, they have places where you can see it from above, so you're seeing this same, what we just viewed from above. Where I was circling here, this is where we were. We saw that where I had that other, and so this is the same viewpoint, except we're a little bit further away, and you see this constant rainbow, because of the mist. But it was beautiful. So this is fairly early in the morning. I didn't take a lot, because you see the waterfall, you could take that forever, but it's really spectacular. And that's looking down the gorge again, and just beautiful. These are we mentioned the different this is a fumarole.
Okay.
This is called Roaring Mountain.
Okay.
For a reason, because this is constant. The Roaring Mountain, because they say you can hear the hiss, the steam, and the steam vent, hissing. That's why I call it Roaring Mountain, because it's. And of course, they keep you way back, because this is constantly breaking down this mountain. It's like this is the heat is turning some of that rock to liquid.
Yeah.
And it's coming down, of course, and that's what you see here. Is this is at one point this was part of that Roaring Mountain. So what will happen as that wears down won't be in our lifetime, Chris. But
no, don't think we...
but that's one part of Yellowstone you see the fumaroles. We talked about mud pots, the geysers in that, and
so many things there that you just do not see anywhere
I know,
else.
like the Grand Prismatic, and the thing is worldwide too. I mean, it's when you think of Grand Prismatic, to say, well, that's the third largest hot spring in the world. It's just it's really neat. The story here is we're heading to Mammoth Springs, which is, again, you'll see, and the road is fairly narrow. And of course, you're going through, it looks like Maine. I mean, you can see the trees in the background. Well, I'm seeing traffic. I'm thinking, geez, what's this stop? And you knew it's not an accident because you're not traveling very fast. Well, all of a sudden, I look at my window, I see 3 bison coming up. This is number 2. Number 1, well, as I said, we'd never got out of our car. We were smarter than that. You can see my mirror. I purposely got this in the picture to show how close this thing. Well, the first one was even closer.
Yeah.
So I had rolled down the window thinking, well, geez, maybe I'll get it as it's passing by. In the first one, literally, I started raising my camera, and the first bison's passing by, and he looked at me, and I thought, what if he wants to headbutt me? And I said, so I literally did take the picture. I'm thinking, okay, pal, I'm not going to take your picture because I had no idea if he would take. You know what it is? I had no idea how it would react.
He's just not photogenic.
So number two, yeah, exactly. Number two was a little bit further away, but still very close. And I got a picture, but I did it very quickly because, again, you're putting your camera up here. And there's still that in between. So I was ready to roll.
As I said, they are fast when they want to be.
Absolutely. So, and there was a third one too, and that's we got this. But so we're now at Mammoth Springs, and Mammoth Springs. And one of the things that part of the roads was shut off. I mean, because the year before there was a flood.
Yes,
they got like over 2 inches of rain. But however, 2 inches of rain here added to the Yellowstone River and a lot of your tributaries leading into that, and so much water came down it wiped out their wastewater system. So so it closed down one of the old hotels at Mammoth Springs.
Interesting. We think of two. By the way, we just got 3 inches of rain the other day, and that's just like normal thing here.
It is
now.
But I think part of it, where you are up high, and you have some of these, the ground can't absorb it as much. I think we're fortunate in a lot of places in Maine. Although we've seen in the last year or two in Maine, like in Western Maine, some of the roads being wiped out. It's just
incredible,
almost like flash floods. I think of was it Route 156 in Western Maine?
Yes. Wilton and that area.
So, and this is called travertine. Travertine is coming up from the limestone, and this is like a calcite, so it's the hot water coming up, and they call it almost like an outside cave. And when we get to the Lehman Caves in the Great Basin, that's almost what you see in a cave too. There's this travertine, so this calcite, and there are there's a Minerva Springs, and there are different names for these things here too, and so we stopped at each one, of course, and there are a lot of people, and a lot of places you have to stay on boardwalks for a lot of this.
And this is the northern part of the park.
This is the northern part of the park, yes. The kind of the northwest part of the park, because that's that second loop we talked about. You can see how white that is. This is the water, steam, the water coming up through the limestone and just creating this calcite, and you can see how large it is. And that's just one part of it, because it's pretty massive. You can see, in fact, here and back that continues on. There's a huge boardwalk, but again, part of it, because we travel so much per day, we covered, I think, 200 miles this day also, but a lot of stopping and hiking and things. So but that's one of the backsides, but it's just amazing. So this is all Mammoth Springs. And so we continued on from Mammoth Springs, and this is a petrified tree, 50 million years old. And you think, how is that possible? But, what happens is, through when a volcano, erupts, the ash gets buried. And sometimes it's buried underwater, and sometimes so much ash that the silica, gets into the cells of the tree, and it literally turns to stone. So this is actually stone. That's why it's petrified. And we've seen these different parts of some of our travels. We've gone and seen other places where petrified, but they've had to protect it. Unfortunately, I think you find people trying to nick off pieces of it, and go up to touch it and climb on it. So this is protected, but that's 50 million years old.
Wow,
petrified. And so we went back and we stayed at Grand Lodge, and so back here. And so I mentioned earlier on when I showed the Yellowstone itself, we had done the geysers, and then we did the up there in the Mammoth Springs and the Grand Canyon. Now we're going to do the Beartooth Highway, and so we're coming. You can see on the left here in the pink. This is Yellowstone Park, and so we actually went in or out of 3 of the entrances to the Yellowstone. The only one we didn't is the north. We came in from the south. We went out the west the next day, and here we're coming out of the northeast. And what's interesting is some of these towns. I mean, we mentioned how coming through the Lamar Valley, you'll see, and one of the first stops we stopped is Cook. Population 88, but it was a funky town. I mean, it's just amazing. But so what we did is we left our place at 6:30 in the morning and drove through the Lamar Valley, which I'll show you, up through this part here, cross over into Montana, and did they call the Beartooth Highway, which climbs up to 13,000 feet. And it was going to predicted rain, so that's one of the reasons we did get out early. We tend to get out early anyway, but we left at 6:30, figuring that, if we could beat the rain. It was predicted at 11 o'clock.
Who was it? Teddy Roosevelt or something?
Yep.
Said the most beautiful highway in
Charles Kuralt. Yeah, Charles Kuralt.
Not even close.
Yeah, no, but there was a Teddy Roosevelt. There was a waterfall that was Roosevelt Spring. And so. But this is, Charles Kuralt used to do On the Road.
Yes, of course.
Of a certain age, remembers On the Road. Yeah, but he said it was one of the most beautiful scenic highways, in the United States, and it really is beautiful. We've been on some beauties too, so this is where we went, and we also came down through. This is the Chief Joseph Byway, which led back to it, and we ate at Red Lodge, which is up in here. So this is where we're heading, just to give people an idea. So we left, as I mentioned, we left our lodge, and we're driving probably for a half hour, 45 minutes, and we're crossing Mount Washburn. So we're up, a few thousand feet. Sunrise is coming up, and it's just a pretty vista. So we stopped to take a picture, and the early morning, you can see the mist, back here, and what we're heading towards called the Lamar Valley, and I'll show you here. There was a little bit of a traffic jam because we had to wait. This is what they're dealing with. They're doing a new part of the road, but you can look at the rock they're moving. It's just incredible. So you can understand why they had to, stop traffic. The road didn't go through here, but this is where they're going to create, either widen the road or do a new part of it. But
it'll take a while.
Going to take a while. So we stopped for about 15 minutes here, road construction, but then. As you're going in, you have also some blockages because people stop, they're taking pictures, some people get out of their cars, and again, we took this from here. This is a close-up of a family, with the calves, crossing, but you have to picture, this wide, huge valley is called the Lamar Valley. I mean, it looks small here, but it was an incredibly large valley, a few thousand bison. In fact, we saw one where we saw a fox among them, and we're thinking, holy mackerel. But, but you can see bear at times, grizzlies, not here, but, fox, pronghorn sheep, it's a deer, pronghorn deer. It's amazing, the wildlife, but for the most part, this is all bison, and it's, as far as the eye can see. So we took this one just from the car, but it was just, it was fascinating. And this is the Beartooth Butte and Beartooth Lake. And we got just a beautiful vista, stopped, took a picture of this. Because along this highway, it was just a lot of beauty. You're seeing, lakes and ponds, and it really is isolated. As I mentioned, we stopped in Cook, which is population 88. And I mentioned to you, we say we're from Maine. There was this young kid, 22 years old, waiting on us. And I said, boy, if I took a picture of him, females in the audience would absolutely love it. But he said, where are you from? I said, we're from Maine. He said, oh my God. He said, Maine is the second most beautiful place I've ever seen. And I said, really? He did an internship. He lived in Montana, but he did an internship in Bodenham.
No kidding.
And so he said, just something about Maine. He said, I don't know what it is. He said, the people, the area, because, in that area too, you get the coastline and you have, it's just southern, it's just beautiful. So and we've heard this from rangers too, where it's just, Acadia, some have been to Acadia or stationed in it. So
some of your best stuff is in your backyard.
Absolutely. So we live in a beautiful, and this was a vista. We were overlooking, the mountains, and it was just, in some parts of the year, we talked about the shoulder season, with the flowers, there weren't a lot of here, but sometimes where it's just full of alpine flowers. They'll say if you come at a certain time, it's just absolutely beautiful. But you can see we're rather high. When we stopped, we met these car full of women, and they were traveling. I think there were two sisters and a friend, and they said, "Oh, have you been over to the waterfall?" We said, "No," and we wouldn't have known about it. But so they said, "If you go across the road," so. We're going in, and one thing we were doing is shouting along the way because
the bears.
The bears, exactly. And they said, we didn't have bear spray with us
Yeah.
But you know, typically if you're shouting, they don't come at you. But it's just one of those things. You had to hike in, you know, probably a quarter of a mile to get here. But took a picture here, of course, coming down. It's just unbelievable force of the water.
Wow.
And this is coming out from the snow fields and, you know, the glaciers, because again, we're up, you know, at this point, we're probably up, you know, 8,000, 9,000 feet, and it's still climbing, because we, as I said, we got up to, this is not my picture. I had to borrow this because, as I mentioned, they mentioned rain, so we had some, you know, fog, mist come in. We did get some good pictures, but not the clarity that you would hope. You know, like we're very fortunate in a lot of our trips. We've had great weather, and like in the Tetons, we're blessed with great day. Here I borrowed this from the internet just to show you how the road winds up to Beartooth Pass.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and so this is just one part of it. But again, if you're looking at 180 degrees, it's just all mountain vistas. And you know, we took this. This is Pilot Peak, which I think is 13,000 feet. You know, as we're climbing up, you know, as one of the viewpoints, you know, overlooking that. But again, you're looking at, you know, the Absaroka Mountains, and it's just beautiful in Wyoming. As we came around a corner, we saw this kid with a snowboard. He kind of waves to us, and so we're coming around a curve, and we kind of slowed down and waved. Well, anyway, as we you know came and curved around, there's a little turnout in a parking lot, and there were 3 more hikers. Well, what he had done in that time, it was probably like a 1-minute run, came down and he snowboarded all the way down to, of course, you get to the grass. Now he's going to walk all the way up.
Oh, geez.
And it's just, so you could tell the dedication, but it's still this time of year. This is June.
Just to say he did it.
Just say it, yeah. And by the way, Amy, this was June, I think it was June 8th or 9th when we were here. 2 weeks later, Amy Hamilton sent me a picture. She said, take a look at this. And it was a picture of showing cars and snow. I thought it was a winter scene, saying, well, this is where you went. It wasn't. June 23rd, they got a snowstorm on the top of where we were. 4 feet of snow fell.
Oh my God.
I know. And the weird part, the next day was clear. I mean, they have these huge machines that take care of it. And I'm sure it's not all the way up. I'm sure it's the very top of the mountain, but still 4 feet of snow fell.
Unbelievable.
And this was June, you know, mid-June. But that's what, now you can see we're at the top of pretty much the Beartooth Pass. We've climbed up, you know, that picture I showed you, the road winding up, but that's what you're looking over. And again, on a clear day, I'm sure you could even see further, but that's none too shabby, as we say in Maine.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it was beautiful. And we just, but again, it is wilderness, you know. We mentioned you see very few people, very few cars actually on this particular day. But we're retired, so again, we were traveling, kids in school. And after we came back down, we went to Red Lodge, because from Red Lodge, we're going to connect to a roadway that leads us to that Chief Joseph Byway, which is another beautiful scenic road too. And we love to find, you know, places when we don't eat a lot of breakfast, because we're usually out the door and we grab something quick, like breakfast bars and stuff to eat on the way or something. But for the lunch here, because it was just really a day of driving and exploring, we stopped at Red Lodge, and it was really neat because this woman here, we sat next to these 2 sisters who were out shopping, gave us a lot of information. It's just really nice people, so it was very pleasant. That is an actual Joe Montana jersey signed by him. You know, typical. We're in Montana, but it was just a neat place. And of course, this got filled too. This table here, it looks smaller, but there was, you know, more tables. But by the time, you know, our meal came, this was full of people. It was just very nice, really nice waitress, etc. But we just love talking to people, you know, as you can see. We didn't take a lot of pictures. I mean, the Chief Joseph Byway was pretty, but it's a lot of things you can see in Maine, for example. And, you know, a lot of it was the rolling hills. What you see is almost a lack of trees in a lot of places, you know, more grass-covered sagebrush in places. And there's some exposed, you know, the red clay you find here, you know, more like the limestone. But this is the type of picture we see on the red, and plus more rain came in too. So we didn't take a lot of pictures because, you know, as you take this, it's something you might see in New England, and thought, you know, it's not as spectacular as you see. So I didn't include it, but this is the Chief Joseph Byway that led us back to the Beartooth, and then we headed back to Yellowstone.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. So from Yellowstone, again, it was drive back to the Lamar Valley, and we got back to, we were at Canyon Lodge. We were in a different place because we're going to go out the west entrance or exit of Yellowstone. And so we were through West Yellowstone to Idaho. We're going to be going to Twin Falls, Idaho. So we had about a 5-hour drive, and but again, along the way, this is Mesa Falls, and it was really almost one of the most magical places we've ever seen. It was it was a little state park, and didn't look like much. I think the ranger station didn't open until like 9, and so we waited and talked to the woman. And there's you just kind of hiked down to an overlook, and when we got there, it was mesmerizing.
Yeah,
because you can see this rainbow is constant. I see the
rainbow, yeah.
Just constant. And the forest, I do have a little video. But the thing is about this was, you can see here, this was volcanic ash. This was all covered in ash, and I think they call it a tuff. And the ash, and so this river, the Snake River, cut through this, in over a few million years with these waterfalls. But this is the Upper Mesa Falls River, and the waterfall, excuse me. And you can see the waterfall. This is just looking behind. So I'm looking from here, and behind it is a gorge. And I don't know how high this is. I'm just guessing a few hundred feet. But this all tree lined, the gorge, and we hiked down further for an overlook also. But it was just pretty magical. It's just because you can see how clear it is the day. Yep. And this is what we saw.
Wow. Yeah, and I've never heard of this place.
We hadn't either. Jean finds these things, and that's because it was a driving day. She tries to find things that are of interest, and had read about this, and you can see how this is almost like ash. How this just ash had fallen years ago, turned to rock, and the river has cut through. But this is Mesa Falls, and so this is just gorgeous. But the people there are so nice too. You talk to people, and some they had little kids, and we just look at this thing and think, you can look at this all day because rainbow. Again, you think of people, and I even thought of Dorothy. Somewhere over the rainbow.
Yeah.
Not really, but this is the Oregon Trail, and what people would do is the signature rock, and so what they would do is have campsites along the Oregon Trail. Of course, in those days, you didn't know if your family went out ahead of you, or you want to know, did they make it? Are they okay? And so what they would do is carve their own in a rock. And so you could see here, this is 1882. But this is over, a few decades of people traveling west, and part of it in Oregon, I guess it was free land, to get people to settle out there, westward expansion into these territories. So after the westward expansion, and Oregon and Washington became through treaty of Great Britain became part of the United States. Not yet. There was the Oregon territories, before it became Washington and Oregon. Right. But this is, a signature rock. And so we're heading to, Twin Falls, and the topography, as you can see, is quite flat. So we're, in the high desert country still. We're still a lot of feet above sea level.
Looks like rain.
Yeah, it looks like rain, exactly. And it wasn't really forecast, but you could see it coming. But, you look and you see the sun poking through, as we looked off in the distance. But, here, in this type of country, you never know if that's going to all of a sudden turn into a funnel cloud.
Yeah, right.
It looked pretty scary at first. You're thinking, kept our eye on it because wind comes up and sheets over. But that was just that what we saw. Heading to Twin Falls, and as we get to Twin Falls, there's reason for Twin Falls. This is the Shoshone, waterfall, which is I think it's 212 feet high.
Wow.
Which is higher than Niagara.
I was going to say.
Yeah, and I think it's 900 feet wide. And you can see the coming down. This is the Snake River, which it will end up in the Columbia River. But it was just again, we loved it because it was magical, and I've got a little video of that too. You know, you had down below, and we hiked across and up to a viewpoint here. It doesn't look that large from this viewpoint, but it is. You know, it's quite a thing. But this is the Shoshone Falls, and that was an Indian tribe, of course.
Yes.
To the Shoshone Indians.
Wow. Yeah, it's very wide. Too.
It was very wide,
yeah.
and it's just, you know, the way it fans out here and is fed through here, and there is just the force of the water, the hydroelectric. I know they're using this hydroelectric power. It's similar to Skowhegan. You know, we generate power from that. In this bridge, they had a wooden bridge, and this bridge was built to supplant that. Of course, you know, as the wooden bridge, probably I'm sure at time, you know, you get a little hairy. But this also reminded us of, we had visited earlier, I think in 2021, the New River Gorge Bridge in West Virginia, and that's the newest national park. But their bridge looks just like this. You can jump off this paraglide off this bridge without a permit any time of the year. So we didn't see anybody doing it, but
without a permit.
Without a permit, which kind of shocked me. It's
in our litigious society, that's pretty amazing.
It is pretty amazing. Yeah, and we saw a couple people packing up one, so they had gone, you know, landed, and you know they were in the parking lot putting their. They had done it, but we didn't see anybody at this point. But we, as I said, it was a day of driving, stopping, you know, it was visiting places, and so we got here in Twin Falls, which is a nice little city, actually, our town, and we stayed in an Airbnb. And the strange thing about this Airbnb is that we never saw the woman. I mean, we get there, and she gave us instructions, you know, get in, and you could hear the TV going. So you're welcome to use the kitchen, but you'll feel funny about it. So
yeah.
we were upstairs in our room. We got something to eat, you know, came back, and TV was going, but it just seems strange. But you know, we feel pretty comfortable doing it. But you know, you stay.
No interaction otherwise.
No interaction otherwise. You know, it's. But you know, so we left the next morning again about 6:30 because we had a longer drive. But and this is the other waterfall here.
Wow. More narrow, but very
more
tall.
narrow, but it is. So this was, I think, another 200-footer. But
wow.
yeah, and this is Shoshone, and this is the Perrine Cooley Falls. I had to look at the name, Perrine Cooley, and that was the Perrine Cooley Bridge, by the way, that bridge. And so here we're going to drive. I don't know how we're doing on time.
We're a little over time, but that's okay. It's okay.
Okay. We'll try to wrap it up. But we're heading to the last part, is Great Basin National Park.
Yeah.
And Great Basin is one of the least, and you'll see why, but about 90,000 people visit it per year. But the reason why we did it, because of the national parks, but we really wanted to see the bristlecone pines.
Yes.
And the bristlecone pines live anywhere between 2,000 to 4,000 or 5,000 years. And
but there's one in particular, though, right?
The Prometheus, they cut down in the 60s, just in the age, it was like 4,500 years old.
Yeah.
You know, they carbon dated, and the rings, and there's a picture of it here. Unbelievable. And I think either the CBS Sunday Morning or I think it was a CBS Sunday Morning did a thing, so you can go on YouTube in bristlecone's pine and view that, because we couldn't see it, unfortunately, because the access road had 3 feet of snow. And you had to hike in about 6 miles to get there. And
would have been problematic.
It would have been problematic. We didn't know that going in. We had hoped that it'd be clear, but it wasn't.
What elevation are you at there?
About 8,000. Well, part of it about 6,000 to 8,000 feet. You know, it's like we went up to Mather Point, and that was 8,000 feet, and the higher mountain there, I think, is 11,000 feet.
And we're still fairly early in June here too, so.
Yeah, and the Tetons, I was sorry for licking my fingers here, but the bristlecone, I was going to say, we had the park. That was about 77,000 acres. Yeah, the Wheeler Peak is 13,000 feet high, so that's the highest mountain in that peak, and the lowest trail is 6,800 feet. So you know, we hiked one the next morning. Now it started around 8,000 feet. You know, and you drive up to that, but then we hike up as you get up at 9,000 feet.
Did you find that wind-wise, hiking-wise, that you adjusted after a few days of doing it? Usually it's a couple days
it
for
is,
acclimation.
And we bring plenty of water. And you know, a piece of advice a person gave us is called hike your own hike.
Yeah.
And what they said there is, you know, you do what you can do, because you know you see people who you just go by you like almost like they're sprinting. You know, there are through hikers, you know, and there are other people you see that are much slower.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, a lot of times you're getting to the same point, maybe slower, maybe faster, but you know, it's really enjoy yourself. And I think that we took that to heart, and so we call it hike our own hike.
Yeah.
If you feel thirsty, we stop, we take a sip of water, you know, we continue on, and
at that elevation and dryness, you can get thirsty very
you can
fast.
and you know, like, you know, and we always make sure the minute you stop feeling thirst, like they said, sometimes you don't want to get past that point.
No, because you're already dehydrated.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the other thing here too is the Lehman Caves, and we had, when we were going south, we had an appointment at 3 o'clock. I mean, you have to go through with the rangers, and so we left early. Twin Falls, we had plenty of time, but we called this an 04 days, because we left Twin Falls and we're going to drive south, and the unique thing, there was not one thing to see along the way. I mean, Gene's usually great. There's just nothing. I mean, when I say nothingness. However, it was one of the most fascinating drives. I thought it was like, oh my goodness, it's going to be. It was really beautiful. I mean, it was beautiful because you'll see why. I mean, and this is one of the reasons. I mean, it was a beautiful day, and as you're driving, I mean, I had, you know, you have your phone, and a lot of times we have data where you can read. I didn't turn that on, except to take pictures. And I had a reading. I got my tablet to read. Didn't read anything. I literally just enjoyed watching the window, because, like you said,
probably didn't have any cell phone reception either.
In a lot of places we didn't.
Yeah.
You know, but with our cell, at times you would have, you could read that, but there were times, like you said, we were in the willy wax. I mean, there were times where you didn't see a building. But it was still fascinating, because the hills, you can see at first here, were almost treeless, like sagebrush. You know, it was covered. Remind me a lot of times of, I say, Ireland. You know, you see Ireland all the times in the folds. You can see the folds in here of the hills. But this went on. We drove for 5 hours, and it ended up going into mountainous region with the snow and stuff. But it was like one pretty much long road, but it was still fascinating. It's just beautiful, because you're looking at prairie on both sides, mountains. At times the mountain range would open up, and it looked like you're looking into eternity, you know, but it was just beautiful. There we go. And what it turned is, you can see here a lot of the sagebrush, but again, from on both sides, you know, this is just one side of the highway. The other side kind of matched it, is, you know, mountain ranges. And it's starting to get, you know, higher in elevation, you know, the snowfields. And first it was lower elevation. And we came out of Idaho, of course, it was flat. And then it went into the hills and then the higher regions. But as you can see, you fence here. You got fences because of the wildlife, you know, across the highway. And as you're driving down, that's what we were looking at. It was just pretty. You know, it's just
stunning.
And you know, we had music going. Like, even there with satellite, sometimes you would drop a signal at certain points. And you wonder, how's that possible? But you know, we had, you know, sometimes here we didn't have great reception, and some of the music was, you just had to put up with it. But it was just beautiful. So we did reach the Great Basin and the national park, and we got there a little early. But this was that Prometheus we talked about, is the bristlecone pine tree. It's 4,500 years old, and it was just fascinating. You know, when you look at this, the rings, you know, you just start looking at these rings, and you think, they said before the Grand Pyramids, the pyramids of Egypt were built, and you think this bristlecone was living. They called it, you know, some of the oldest organisms living on the planet, you know, as far as, you know, a tree or anything. It's just fascinating. I wish we could have seen them in person. Yeah. But this was in the ranger station. This one was Prometheus. They cut it down, you know, really for purposes, but they're still bristlecone pines, which we didn't get to see. This was taken from the internet. That's kind of what it looks like. And again, if people are interested, to go on the internet and just, if you type in on YouTube, bristlecone pine, there's some wonderful things talking about it. And it's just, but these trees, maybe 3,000, 4,000 years old that we're looking at, which is hard to fathom, but in very austere conditions, high winds, not great soil, but you think that these trees have...
They're incredible survivors.
Absolutely. Yeah. We went to the Lehman Caves, and some of the things you're going to see here, these represent, these are called soda, soda straws from the top. Two things. One is, when this cave was first discovered, they would bring people down and it had candles. And what they would allow people to do, you could, with a candle, write your name on the on the ceiling.
Yeah.
Of course, they stopped that practice, as you can imagine. They don't want people doing that nowadays, and you can't take anything. But these soda straws, talk about a few hundred years old. So with just the drip of we talked about travertine and Mammoth Springs, this is the calcite leaching through water. These are soda straws. You can see here, they call part of this bacon, because looking here is bacon, because this is coming down from the caves, the leaching through again, reaching through the limestone, the formations.
Now, this was named after well, I guess an explorer, but his name was Lehman.
Lehman. The Lehman Caves
and stuff and whatever on his way
1800s, and a lot of these were a lot of these caves were discovered, inadvertently by people. One thing was, I don't care, Wind Cave or Mammoth, by 14-year-old kids, and then of course when they're exploring these, they're doing it with candles and ropes and things, and they don't know what drops off. Here, they've got lights, boardwalk, and you're with a ranger, so you can't go in without a ranger. And they have also a person there in case someone gets claustrophobic, which has happened.
There are some bats in those caves.
There are something like 12 species of bats, And, this is called a column because, of course, it follows a stalactite and a stalagmite form, and these are almost like draperies. So you can see it forms here and comes down, and they look almost like drapes. And this is a shield. That's one of the things that are rare, a shield, and almost like drapery, because it looks like a shield, like a Viking would do. And I'm trying to rush through this, but there's the Lehman Caves, and again more formations.
Wow.
Yeah, beautiful. And so we were here, and this is the Hunter Mountain Pass, and this was a walkway. We came up the overlook, and this was the night before. And one of the reasons I think it was less, because population of these places are not. Baker, population like 98 people.
Yeah.
And it was a woman we met, I think, from Massachusetts, opened a little general store. It was really beautiful, but she loved it, and she was there. Of course, you get tourists and people going through, but Eli is about, I think it's 50 miles away, population 2,200.
It makes you realize that as populated as we think this country is, there's still a number of wide open areas. Well, you said the population of the state of Wyoming is 500,000 people in a state that's probably, 3 times bigger than Maine?
Maine, yeah.
Pretty amazing.
And when we drove from Twin Falls to this Great Basin, there were very few towns. There were times where we, as I said, we didn't see any buildings, and we went through, Eli, it looks like populated, but you check the population 2,200, so it's not even the size of Skowhegan, but, it had, the gas stations and some of the fast food places and stuff, but, here, this is the morning hike. We're up the next part here. I'm just kind of rushing through now, but again, we're started about 8,000 feet, and we're climbing up 1,000 feet or so, and through forests, and again you have poplar trees here, not poplar, aspen, aspen, correct, which is in the poplar family, and the thing about Great Basin is that it's landlocked. None of this water reaches the sea. So this is all landlocked, surrounded by mountains. So this all leaches into the soil or lakes, and so small lakes or ponds. So everything you see here never makes it to the sea, which is kind of interesting. Great Basin again is up, 5,000-6,000 feet. On our way back, we're heading back the next day. We're going to be heading to West Wendover. on our way to Salt Lake City the next day. This man, there was a Rexall store museum that he has kept alive. Again, he's in a town of population of like 100 people. And we saw this open. So on the way back, we stopped, and he gave us a great tour. And I mean, what he has done, he does it almost pretty much himself. The products on the shelves, you know, you can see this. You're going to see a couple of soda jerks, you know, especially the guy on the left is a soda jerk. But he had prescriptions that go into the, you know, to Washington. You know, these people here, I don't know what they're mixing up, but a little shaky pizza maybe.
Yeah.
He's, oh yeah, go behind me, I'll take a picture of you. But he was very kind, and we would spend, so we went to West Wendover, stayed overnight at this casino, and that's a longer story, but it was anyway beautiful, but it was just really a place to stay, free night. So we went in the Bonneville Salt Flats. It's about 12 miles long, but of course people know it for the racing.
That's right.
The
exactly.
racing, in some parts of this, it's about 5 feet deep. It does, you know, table salt, but it was part of the Bonneville Lake, which was about the size of Utah at one time.
Yeah.
And dried up because this Great Salt Lake was part of that Lake Bonneville. So what's left is, you know, the leaching, and at times you do get some rain that this is water that then evaporates, leaves minerals coming down from the mountains. Any water that drains down from here ends up with it as, you know, salt. And so
it's a lot of salt too.
So we didn't drive our car because again, it can be bad for it. Of course, you know, the people who drive out here, they race, you know, whether it's, there's been movies made of this and things.
Oh, yes.
So Jean saw this, so we took funny pictures, you know, and so, you know, and what she does is sets up a phone, like either on a shoe or something like that, and the son's behind us, and we couldn't see anything, so she could barely see, so it looks like, because it looks like I'm a midget, you know, talking to her.
Oh, yeah, that's clever.
Yeah,
that is very clever.
And she's a little monkey, you know, so. But it's just, you know, just funny. And so, so if there was a man who saw us, he came over and thinking, uh-oh, what did we do? And he said, I just saw you guys taking a picture. Well, anyway, he was from California passing through, and again, you just start talking to people.
Oh, yeah.
Well, this is the Great Salt Lake.
Yes.
The depth of this is only about, I think it was 30 feet or 16 feet. Not much at all.
You go swimming?
No, we didn't. But they said this is almost similar to the Dead Sea. I mean, very densely salt.
I actually went in it, and it's densely salt.
Yeah.
Better take a good shower.
Yeah, that's the thing. We were traveling to. We were going to be dropping off our car the same day. So we did Bonneville with Great Salt Lake, and then we were going to drop off our car because we were flying out the next morning at 5 in the morning. So we did want to see this, the Great Salt Lake. And I think one was Antelope Island, and I think there was a Fremont Island. But as you can see, this is due to evaporation, and that happened within the last year. There was a lot of evaporation, and the smell of it, because as they said, the material is really almost toxic. Because it's highly dense. You know, there's a lot of minerals there, and they said that it really. It depends on rainfall. So rainfall and any, you know, if you have any drought years.
Well, thank goodness for last winter, because that. God, you know, they were in desperate shape.
Absolutely.
Through most of the western states, but
and believe it or not, Chris,
quite as much now.
That's the last slide, because what we did is from here, we went from Great Salt Lake to Salt Lake City and dropped off our car, and then got a shuttle to the hotel that night. We didn't even eat supper. We didn't even have time for that, and so we packed up and took a shuttle at 3 a.m.
Really fascinating, though. Very fascinating. So, what are we going to have next year, Mike?
You got your pick. I mean, we've been on little different trips, you know, that we'll be going to there. We went to Washington. We just went to Washington in September, and that was, again, a beautiful trip, too. We just some beautiful hikes there. We did the Joshua Tree. We did the Grand Canyon last January. The Grand Canyon in Sedona, in which I understand you have a
little place,
a little place now in Sedona, which is a beautiful spot too.
Oh yeah.
You know, there's so many different trips. We went to Newfoundland last year for 2.5-3 weeks, and that was really fascinating. That was beautiful too. So it's just
We're not going to lack for material.
we're not going to laugh for material.
And that's good, and like to have you back on an annual basis, and this time of year sounds good.
Yeah, and people traveling Yellowstone, I mean, it's a beautiful place, and the Tetons is just a lot to see.
Yeah, well, for those particularly who don't have that opportunity to get out there, we're going to give you at least a little flavor
Yes.
of what it's really like,
Yeah.
and you can live kind of vicariously through.
Right, we'll do
like,
the hiking, you know,
yeah.
for them, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much,
You're welcome.
Mike. Once again, Mike Walker with us and we'll have him back again. He does such a good job. We'll have him back again next year. And now you know.